Her hijab hid her desires until he saw through it, and it all began on a dusky afternoon when the call to prayer echoed through the quiet neighborhood and she stepped out of her home. Her eyes lowered, her steps graceful, her presence veiled in modesty. Yet wrapped in mystery, his gaze caught her just as the wind lifted the edge of her scarf, revealing a sliver of her cheek. The kind of moment so fleeting it felt imagined, but it lingered in his mind like a prayer unanswered, like a verse waiting to be recited. She didn't see him at first, or maybe she pretended not to, her eyes never straying from the ground, her fingers tightening around her shopping bag, but he was already caught, already drawn into her silent world, a world layered in fabric and faith and something unspoken. He began to appear where she was, not by chance, never by accident, always as if fate whispered his name into the rhythm of her routine, at the library, at the market, at the corner where jasmine grew thick and sweet and heavy in the summer heat. He said nothing for weeks, only watched, only waited until the day she dropped a book and he bent down and their hands touched, and in that second, in the space between skin and silence, she looked up and his world shifted. Her eyes were soft but fierce, guarded but trembling with something deep, something warm, something unsaid. She nodded once, then turned but left the book behind. A silent invitation. He picked it up, ran his fingers along the spine, and smiled because now he knew she had seen him 2 days past, and the sky darkened and brightened, and every prayer he offered carried her name. Not spoken, not aloud, but in the corners of his heart, in the spaces where longing lived, he wrote a note, tucked it into the returned book, just 3 words: I see you. And when she borrowed the same title a week later, she held it close as if the pages burned through her palms. Her cheeks flushed, and for the first time she looked directly at him across the library. The veil still framed her face, but her eyes held no shield, only fire. They met again beneath the arch of the masjid, where the lanterns glowed golden and the air smelled of rosewater. He stood quietly, his hands folded in front of him. Her voice was soft when she finally spoke. It startled him how it slid into his chest like the first sip of warm tea. You shouldn't, she said. And yet, to keep showing up, he answered, because something in you called me first. And maybe her lips never curved into a full smile, but the glint in her eyes was brighter than the moon. They began to walk together under moonlight beside still waters, never touching, never daring, but everything between them simmered, every glance a caress, every silence a confession. He learned she loved poetry and roses and the sound of rain against the roof. She learned he spoke to his mother with gentleness and read scripture with reverence. He never asked to see her without the hijab. He never needed to, because he already saw her, the real her, the one who laughed freely when no one was watching, the one whose passion for life pulsed beneath her, quiet like a second heartbeat. And slowly her walls softened, not for the world, but for him alone. She allowed him into her sacred places, into the folds of her fears, into the trembling core of her hope, until one day, as the sun melted behind the hills and call to prayer floated once more into the amber sky, she reached for his hand and held it, not in defiance, but in trust. And in that moment she whispered the truth, not with her voice, but with the way her fingers wrapped around his. She had hidden her desires, not to bury them, but to protect them. And now they were no longer secrets, they were offerings. They were shared, and he saw her fully, not in spite of the veil, but through it and within it and beyond it, because love does not need bare skin to be felt. It only needs a heart willing to see, willing to stay, willing to burn with quiet fire forever. They walked together through narrow lanes where the silence was scented with cardamom and dusk and stories yet untold, where the shadows leaned in to listen, and every step echoed with meanings neither dared speak aloud. His fingers remained at his sides, respectful yet aching, while hers brushed her scarf as if to anchor herself in a world now shifting like sand beneath. Bare feet, she asked him once under the ancient fig tree, "Why do you keep looking at me like that?" And he replied, "Because every time I see you, I forget who I was before." And she turned away, not because she was shy, but because the truth had cracked something inside her, a truth she had buried beneath years of should and shouldn't, beneath prayers whispered in the dark and tears wiped away before anyone could see. She had grown up believing love was something dangerous, something stolen, something fleeting, but here it was now, slow and sacred, patient and real. She began to speak more with her eyes, with the way she lingered a moment longer at his side, with the way she let her laughter rise like morning light, lifting the veil of fear from her chest. He began to write to her, never. Letters, just verses, left in places only she would find under her favorite poetry book slipped behind her prayer mat, woven into the edge of a jasmine garland, and she read them all, memorized them, recited them to herself like prayers. When she couldn't sleep one evening after the rain had come and gone, leaving the world slick with silver, they stood in the courtyard, her scarf damp, her breath warm. He looked at her not as a man possessed, but as one who had been found, and she whispered something so soft it could have been the wind. I think I'm not afraid anymore. And he reached for her hand, not to take it, but to hold it in the quiet way someone holds a promise, not to break it, but to cherish it, and she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned her forehead against his chest, letting the world dissolve around them until only breath remained, until only heartbeats told time. She brought him to meet her father, who watched him with eyes that measured more than words, but saw something in him that felt like truth, that felt like prayer answered in human form. And when the proposal came, it came not with fanfare, but with presence, with hands offered and words spoken, not for show, but for shelter. She wore white on the day of the Nekah, not because she wanted to be seen, but because she wanted him to know that every part of her was ready. The veil was still there, delicate and light, catching the sunlight like a second skin. And when he lifted it, his hands trembled, not out of hunger, but out of awe, because beneath it was the woman he had already loved fully, without needing to see what the world said mattered. And now he saw all of her and loved her still and more and always, and she smiled with her whole soul, because she had not given herself away. She had chosen, and in choosing had found a freedom no one ever told her existed. They walked back home side by side, his fingers laced with hers, her scarf dancing in the breeze, and though no one watching would know what passed between them, every step was a vow, every glance a poem. And though her hijab still rested over her hair and framed her face, now it did not hide her, now it carried her. Now it revealed everything that mattered, everything that had always been there, waiting to be seen, waiting to be loved, waiting for him.